Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, the NFL draft is about 5.5 weeks away. NFL free agency has been in high gear over the last couple weeks. A lot to break down from free agent signings, trades, things that are impacting the 2025 NFL draft, and everything in terms of depth charts, fantasy, and dynasty leagues. But so much of our focus will be on how this is going to impact the 2025 NFL draft. We'll go through all the significant moves, the trades, the signings, how it impacts the first round or so of the 2025 NFL draft. I'll also give my fantasy dynasty spin for people who are into that as well. It has been a busy few days. I am recording this on Thursday night, so we will see if anything breaks over while we're live tonight or over the next couple of days as well. And then anything that happens over the next couple of days, if need be, we'll break it down with another podcast as well. But I did want to let the first couple of days of free agency kind of come and go. It's been a busy few days. It started late on Sunday with a flurry of activity, and then the legal tampering period on Monday, and it's just been nonstop since then. But there is also a ton of really impactful players still out there that have been surprising that we haven't seen them here in this first wave of free agency. And I'll also talk about that a little bit in terms of the impact that maybe the NFL draft is having on why we haven't seen so many of these other skill players, in particular wide receivers, running backs, be scooped up yet. I think some of it has to do with what is happening in terms of the NFL draft and teams looking for that maybe as their way to upgrade rather than go the free agency route with the questions that surround some of these free agents. But let's get right into it. Let's start with some of the big trades and the impact that it's had. DK Metcalf was the biggest name that has been traded since we last spoke. Obviously, during the Combine weekend, we talked about the Deebo Samuel trade. So the DK Metcalf traded to Pittsburgh for 2025 second, and then on top of it, the Steelers giving him a monster contract extension. My thoughts is I think DK Metcalf is a good receiver, a very good receiver. I don't think he's a great receiver. I don't think he's a guy that I'd be willing to trade a day two pick for, a round two pick, I should say, and invest in that kind of money, especially when George Pickens is on the roster. There's a lot of overlap in their skill set. But the impact of that is a couple things. The impact of it, one, is if Pittsburgh was thinking about taking a receiver there in the first round, I think this move of DK Metcalf takes them out of the mix for a wide receiver, unless there's a secondary move yet to happen, which would send George Pickens out. If they don't think they're going to keep him long term, maybe they see if they can get a day two pick for him, and then maybe round one is an option then for a wide receiver like Golden or Ibuka or other guys in that range where the Steelers are picking. So I think that's the impact it has there. On the flip side, the impact for Seattle is now they have a gaping hole at the other wide receiver position. Obviously, Jackson Smith-Njigba. What else? They're going to have to, my guess is, they moved on from Tyler Lockett. They'll probably bring a veteran in, but then I also think somewhere in the first couple rounds of the NFL draft, they're going to have to make a pretty decent investment in another wide receiver, especially an outside guy. Smith-Njigba more on the inside, can place him outside, but he's more a guy who's going to shine from the inside. So they really need, I think, to get a veteran presence on the outside and then also invest in a receiver in the first couple rounds that can play on the outside as well. So I think it does impact Seattle's plans. They need a wide receiver in the first couple rounds. I think it impacts Pittsburgh's plans. They don't need a wide receiver now in round one or round two unless they move on from George Pickens in a trade. In terms of fantasy or dynasty value, I think it's a stock down on DK Metcalf. We don't know about the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh yet. Maybe it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and then maybe he can be about status quo. But we do know that Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator. He's going to pound the rock a lot. They have two guys now that their skill sets overlap. So it's not like DK Metcalf is going to be the only guy that gets those vertical shots, whoever the quarterback is. So I think it's a stock down on DK Metcalf. If I could get a decent return in a trade for him in Dynasty, I would take it. On the flip side, right now, Jackson Smith-Njigba should be valued as a, top 15-ish wide receiver in Dynasty. I think he's a guy that if we were drafting redraft right now, we'd probably be talking about as a 3rd round pick. So I think stock up on Smith-Njigba, stock down on DK Metcalf. I'd sell if I can, and it impacts Pittsburgh's plans and Seattle's plans for the NFL draft. Next biggest trade we had in terms of the offensive skill players was Geno Smith. Staying with Seattle, he was traded from Seattle to the Raiders for a 2025 3rd round pick. I think the impact of this in terms of the draft is pretty significant. I don't think the Raiders take a quarterback now in the 1st round in the top 10. There were some connections with them and Shedeur Sanders, whether they think he's not going to be there, whether they're not in love with him. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is ready to play sooner rather than later. He played a lot of college ball. He could have stepped in there and been the starter and maybe just had a bridge quarterback for the first 4 games, 6 games, 8 games. That's not going to be Geno Smith. So I think now it takes Seattle out of the mix for taking a quarterback in round 1. I think it opens the door maybe for the Raiders to take a quarterback on day 2. There's been a lot of connections, with Will Howard, to maybe be the someone that the Raiders are targeting on day 2, thanks to the connection there with Chip Kelly. So I think that's possible. I think now the Raiders very much could be looking at a guy like Ashton Genty. All of a sudden, your offense is built around Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers. Geno Smith is a functional, middle-of-the-pack, good starting quarterback. So I think that's the route that the Raiders are looking at. So I do think it impacts their draft plans. I don't think quarterback is in the conversation at round 1, even if they did like Shedeur Sanders. I think more now it's day 2, one of those secondary guys to kind of develop in the wings for, behind Geno Smith for a couple years. On the Seattle side, obviously the second domino effect, and we'll get to that in free agency info, is the Sam Darnold signing. But in terms of Geno Smith, I think his stock in terms of dynasty is probably about neutral right now. Let's see what they do. They have Brock Bowers, but we don't know that they're going to get a guy like Ashton Genty to help out the offense. We don't know if they're going to get a guy like Ted McMillan. So he was going from DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba to the Raiders offense. I don't think it's a stock up. I would say maybe slightly stock down, but it has a chance to be stock neutral once things kind of settle out there for the Raiders. Another big move. It was going to be more of a releasing and then a signing, but Houston kind of came in last minute and offered Jacksonville a 7th round pick in the 2026 NFL draft for Christian Kirk. I don't think it impacts any draft plans. Christian Kirk is a veteran wide receiver. I don't think it impacts what either of those teams would have done if Jacksonville would have kept Kirk, if the Texans wouldn't have gotten Kirk. I don't think it impacts draft plans at all. I think people worry too much about veteran moves like this impacting draft plans. It has to be a significant move to maybe alter a draft plan. So I don't think the Christian Kirk trade impacts draft plans under any circumstance, but I do like the move for Houston. I think Christian Kirk really complements Nico Collins well. I think CJ Stroud will look to Christian Kirk to be one of his safety valves. They obviously don't have Tank Dell this year due to injury. Stephon Diggs is a free agent. He's no longer there. So there's a lot of targets to go around. CJ Stroud likes targeting the slot receiver. We've seen that before. So I think it's a really good opportunity for Christian Kirk maybe to get back some of that value that he did not. He seemed like he was on the downward slope last year prior to the injury. Still a relatively young guy. And, this is a guy who's had a couple of really big years there in Jacksonville, even after there was a lot of questions about the contract they gave him. Obviously, last year ended with the injury. But I really like the move for Houston. It's a low risk, high reward move. I could see Christian Kirk being a really interesting, buy in Dynasty. If you're looking for like a veteran wide receiver 4-5 type, and I don't think he would cost very much right now, but I think he could have an 85 to 90 catch season in him if CJ Stroud gets some protection, which we'll talk about that other big move momentarily. Got to keep CJ Stroud upright, but I think there's a real possibility he can be the second guy on that team behind Nico Collins in receptions, yards, and all receiving categories. The move I just alluded to, the Texans making the trade with shipping out Laramie Tunsil to Washington for 2, 3, and 4. I think this does have ramifications throughout the NFL draft. I think it takes Washington out of the mix for going offensive line in the first round. I think in terms of offensive tackle, I think it makes the Texans need an offensive tackle almost as they must in the first round to try to help out that offensive line. You're not going to find an offensive tackle in free agency almost ever, especially one of decent quality. And you're definitely not going to find it at this stage now in free agency if they haven't made a move yet. So I think the draft plans for both Houston and Washington, especially Houston, dramatically altered by that trade. Washington sent them a 2 and I think a 4 next year, and then a 3 this year. And there was some other late round swap as well in there. But I do think Houston now very much needing a tackle in the first round. Washington now has the guy that they hope for the next couple of years is the left tackle that's going to provide protection for Jaden Daniels. Some other small trades, staying with the Texans, they traded for CJ Gardner-Johnson, and they shipped out Kenyon Green, former first-round pick, to Philadelphia. Interesting move. I think CJ Gardner-Johnson steps right in to be a guy who him and Jalen Petrie, a really nice 1-2 duo at the safety position. In terms of the Eagles, obviously cutting some costs right there. A lot of guys making high salaries. There might have been some other stuff that he didn't really fit in. They keep bringing him back, then they ship him out. But the Green part of this is fascinating to me because we've seen them, have a reclamation project with Becton. Can they do the same now for Green? I think it's interesting. I kind of trust a lot of what Philadelphia is doing. It's hard not to. I don't think that move in any way moves the needle in terms of what either team might do in the draft. You could say there's a possibility that now with Petrie and Gardner-Johnson, safety is not an area that Houston is looking at. I don't think that would have been a high priority spot for them in the first couple of rounds of the draft anyway. So I don't think it really moves the needle in terms of the 2025 NFL draft. Cleveland trading for Kenny Pickett is interesting. They also brought Russell Wilson in on a visit today, but he didn't sign there, heading to New York for a visit now. So the Cleveland situation is fascinating. You've also heard them connected to Kirk Cousins if he becomes available at some point. So I do think the Kenny Pickett and then them looking at another veteran like Russell Wilson, a lot of tea leaves connecting them to Kirk Cousins, that kind of leads me to think that maybe they only love Ward as their quarterback of choice, and they don't think they're going to be able to get Cam Ward. Or they aren't in love with either of the quarterbacks, like we first thought was the case before there was a lot of buzz from an Adam Schefter, video saying that he thinks Cleveland's going to take a quarterback at 2. Trading for Pickett and then still searching for another veteran seems like a team that either one only loves one quarterback in the draft and think he's going to be gone before they pick, or 2, they're not in love with the quarterbacks and they're going to take the best positional player, whether that's Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, whoever they have on the board, if they have the choice between them. So I do think while Kenny Pickett by himself, I don't think changes anything in terms of draft plans, trading for Pickett and then still being connected to a veteran like Russell Wilson and still being connected to the possibility of Kirk Cousins down the line, I think does move the needle a little bit about maybe them not looking at quarterback at pick 2. So there's some impact there as well. Chicago trading for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. I think that does. And even if we tie in the Drew Dalman signing as well in free agency, just talk about all three of them in one shot, I think this does have an impact on the NFL draft. I don't think interior offensive line is it going to be a target now for them in the first round. If they see a tackle that they really like, I don't think that would be a bad investment. So I don't think we could take tackle off the board for Chicago. They're trying to build a fort there around, Caleb Williams, and that's what Ben Johnson wants. So I do think offensive tackle is still in the mix, but if they were maybe going to be one of the first teams to consider an interior offensive lineman, I think that's out the window now. I think the moves that they've made in free agency on both the O-line and the D-line, I think now opens up. I think they could still use an edge rusher. I think they could still use an offensive tackle if they believe that he could be a big-time tackle for them for the long haul there for Caleb Williams. But I think the moves they've made in free agency, especially the trades and trying to fortify that offensive line and the signing of Dalman, I think now opens up the possibility that they could consider Ashton Genty with their first-round pick and add him to the mix there. So I do think these trades and signings and free agencies for the Bears have opened up the possibility now of maybe Ashton Genty in round 1. If not him, edge rusher or offensive tackle, I think has a high upside and potential. So the moves to fortify the interior offensive line might have impacted the first round a little bit. I think you can make the case it might have impacted some, secondary picks. Usually you don't see a lot of guards go in round 1, but, we don't know how some of these offensive tackles that are pegged as offensive tackles. Some teams might view them as guards. Obviously, we have a couple guard prospects that are in the mix to go round one as well. I think this takes them out of that possibility of an interior offensive line for sure. Keeps tackle in play, edge rusher in play, but now opens up the possibility maybe of Ashton Genty there in round one. Just looking through, I think those are the trades that kind of stood out in terms of significance in some way, shape, or form. Let's take this to the draft rumors and impact from some of the moves in free agency, and then I'll kind of go through position by position, the things that really stood out. Let's start with Tennessee. Their free agent signings, fortifying the offensive line, Dan Moore, Kevin Zeitler. It sure seems between those moves and the Titans not really being more vested in a veteran quarterback here, kind of seems that the tides might be turning, if you want to believe, if you want to look at the betting odds, that Cam Ward's going to be the first pick in the draft. There was a lot of buzz for months that it would be Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter because their GM said, we're not going to pass on a generational talent. I think that might have just been a general statement before they really started getting into the process. They're bringing in guys to put a good offensive line there. Zeitler in particular is setting the foundation where you want to put your rookie quarterback in the best position to succeed, not really being connected to any of the veterans. There was some buzz that maybe they were snooping around Russell Wilson. It sure seems like at this point, maybe they still bring in another veteran, or maybe they just kind of, have Will Levis there. He's been in the building now for a couple of years. And then if they draft Cam Ward's probably going to start from week one. Levis could be their backup. Maybe they bring in another veteran as more of a mentor to Cam Ward. But it's starting to see that it looks like Ward. Now, they could be doing one hell of a job trying to show interest in Cam Ward to kind of make maybe the Giants or somebody pony up a better offer. I don't think that's impossible to think that's the scenario that's going on here, because in reality, it should 100% be. Even if they don't want Cam Ward, between now and then, all they should do is talk up Cam Ward and pretend and act like they do want a quarterback, get everybody to believe that. And then at the last minute, they could kind of say, oh, what's your best offer to the Giants or the Browns to move up one or the Giants to move up two? And then if they get the offer they like, say accept. And maybe because they're showing so much, teams would pony up a little bit more to try to persuade them to move down. But in reality, let's just take this from a perspective. If they believe in Cam Ward, Cleveland can't come up and get him. The Giants can't come up and get him. It doesn't matter if the Giants offer their future, a day 2 pick this year and a number 1 next year. Whatever realistic package you think might be fair, and even if it's an overpay, if Tennessee believes Cam Ward can be their franchise quarterback, it doesn't matter. They're not going to come off of him. The same way New England wasn't coming off of Drake May last year. The same way Washington wasn't coming off of Jaden Daniels. So if you're looking at and reading the tea leaves of what they've done in free agency, what the rumors are out there, what the betting lines are out there, it sure seems like Tennessee's thinking quarterback, whether it's a smokescreen and they're trying to get teams to pony up, maybe. I tend to believe that they're looking at him as a realistic option and then start building up around him, but they already have the O-line. So then you can start picking and choosing, receivers, day 2, day 3, build up that. They have Tajay Spears there. They have Tony Pollard there. They can kind of maybe push the running back for down the line and maybe look to get pass catchers surrounding him with the offensive line to kind of put him in a position to be successful in year 1 as a first overall pick. So that's Tennessee. Cleveland, we talked about Kenny Pickett, the interest in Russell Wilson, the connections to Kirk Cousins, and the impact that might have for them to be able to go best player available and go Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. The Giants, interesting here. I still think what they want to do is veteran quarterback and rookie quarterback. I think they wanted Cam Ward, but I think they like Shadu Sanders as well. I think they might have Cam Ward 1 in the pecking order, but I don't think it's Cam Ward is clearly the guy, and then they don't really like Shadu Sanders. I think they like Sanders. There's been a lot connecting to them. I'm intrigued by, they went out there, they signed Adebo to be their cornerback 1. They drafted Andrew Phillips last year in the 3rd round, who was a good nickel corner. They drafted Deontay Banks 2 years ago, not ready to give up on him yet. Those are their top 3 corners. On the receiving side of it, They have Malik Neighbors. They have Wando Robinson in the slot. And they brought back, in a surprise move, Darius Slayton. When you look at what they have as their top 3 receivers and top 3 corners, you can make the case if they draft Travis Hunter, somebody is really getting moved off the depth chart to make room for Travis Hunter, unless he's going to go like halfway on each side, which I don't think is too realistic. It's possible. But the Giants' moves seem to indicate, from my perspective, that I'm not sure Travis Hunter is really in play for them. I think the one scenario, if they pivot away from a quarterback, or if quarterback happens to go 1-2, could be Abdul Carter. Yes, they have Brian Burns. Yes, they have Kayvon Thibodeau. They don't have another top edge pass rusher. Kayvon Thibodeau, they're going to have to make a decision on him and his 5th-year option sooner rather than later. So I almost think the Giants' moves in free agency, to me, say it's Ward, it's Sanders, or it's Carter. As much as I love Travis Hunter, I think he's the best player in the draft. I would love it if the Giants drafted him. I just have a hard time, based on the moves that they've made, thinking that. Now, maybe he's the best player. They truly do go best player available. Maybe things are changed if they land the Aaron Rodgers and they look at getting him another prolific weapon and use Travis Hunter more on the offensive side. Possible. It's possible. But I think their moves in free agency, to me, indicate that I wouldn't be surprised if their top 3 on their overall big board for their needs and their team is the 2 quarterbacks and Abdul Carter. And they're kind of locked in. We're getting one of these 3. If we don't get the quarterback, we'll take Abdul Carter, and then we'll figure something else out, maybe a 2nd-round quarterback, a trade back in the round 1, something along those lines. New England, active in free agency. We knew they would. They had a boatload of money. They signed Carlton Davis. He's now playing alongside Christian Gonzalez. I think, to me, that tells me I don't think they're adding Travis Hunter to the cornerback room. So if they draft Travis Hunter and they have this massive need at wide receiver, I think Travis Hunter is going to play more wide receiver for Patriots than he would cornerback. I think any team he ends up on, he's going to play both ways at some point. But I could see a scenario with Davis and with Gonzalez that New England, if they make the move for Travis Hunter, if he's there at 4, he's lining up on the wide receiver side of things. So I do think the signing of Carlton Davis impacts things. The other impact is they went out there and were the winner of the Milton Williams sweepstakes, putting him next to Christian Barmore. Their defensive tackles are top of the heap here. I'm not sure that leaves a spot for them to consider Mason Graham. So for me, I think they might be a Travis Hunter spot if he's there as a receiver and maybe part-time on a cornerback, or they look at whoever their favorite offensive tackle is, because that's still a gaping need there to protect Drake May long-term. So I think that would be a scenario there. A small impact in terms of the draft and maybe getting an extra piece of draft capital. They did sign Josh Dobbs, which I thought was a little bit interesting. They obviously have Drake May as their guy. Are they looking to maybe get a early day 3 pick, maybe even a round 3 pick if someone really believes in him for Joe Milton? We saw him look good in that last game of the season. He's got a lot of raw tools. I think he could be had for a 4th-round pick. I could see a team being interested in him, be willing to give up maybe a late round 3 or an early day 3 for Joe Milton. But I do think the Patriots now, probably out of the Mason Graham idea, Travis Hunter, I think, would be more receiver for them than corner based on the impact that free agency has had. We already talked about the Raiders. I think they're out of the quarterback sweepstakes at pick 6. I think more of a day 2 option now. Like I said, keep an eye on Will Howard there and the connection with Chip Kelly. Talked about Chicago, so I think pick 10 now could be the first spot where you have I think the Raiders are in play for Ashton Genty at 6. I think Chicago's in play at 10. I think the Cowboys are still in play at 12. I think 6, 10, and 12, any of them could be spots now where we see Ashton Genty come off the board. The Denver Broncos signed Evan Ingram, 2-year deal. I think they see a role for him. I think Sean Payton wants guys who could really be impactful right away. I don't think he's playing the long game here. I think he has a plan for Evan Ingram. I don't see him signing Evan Ingram and then turning around and drafting Colston Loveland. I don't think Tyler Warren will be there, so I'm not even bringing him up. Warren is very different than a guy like Evan Ingram. Colston Loveland is more of a guy who's going to be predominantly a pass catcher like Evan Ingram. So I think if Colston Loveland, and I don't think he's going to make it to 20, I think he's going to the top 15. But if Colston Loveland was to slip to 20, I know we've seen that in some mocks. I don't think he's going to be there, but if he was, I don't think the Broncos are really a realistic option for him at pick 20. If they were going to go pass catcher now, I think it would be more wide receiver than tight end. So I do think the addition of Evan Ingram may take them out of the Colston Loveland sweepstakes. If for some reason Warren was there and he's not, I think he's a very different style player than Ingram, that you can make both of that work. I think Loveland would and Ingram, one of them would not play a lot. I just don't see the point in having both of them. So I think the Loveland idea to Denver that a lot of people have been connecting, I don't think that's really realistic after the Evan Ingram signing. We talked about Pittsburgh. I could see them now with the trade of DK Metcalf. I don't think wide receivers in the mix unless they trade George Pickens, like I mentioned before. They signed Darius Slay. I think they could go another corner. They could go running back because they lost Najee Harris. But I also think they could go Jackson Dart or a quarterback there as well, especially if they don't get Aaron Rodgers. I think they could think about a quarterback there. Minnesota at 24 is really interesting. They've really fortified the offensive line with multiple moves and the defensive line. I think now pick 24 opens up the possibility for them to think about a running back. Maybe O'Marion Hampton's still there. But in the more likely scenario, they are limited in picks after multiple trades last year in the NFL draft. I think now really by fortifying the O-line and D-line, I think now it opens up the possibility for them to even make a trade more likely, move out of round one, pick up some extra additional draft capital. They could still target a running back on somewhere on early round 2 and still have their choice and add more picks there to kind of add to the well there as they move forward with J.J. McCarthy at the helm there, with a really stacked team around him. Talked about Houston before, pick 25. I think now they are very much targeted in on getting an offensive tackle after the Laramie Tunsil trade. Next, top of the second round, just real quick, I do think the buzz on these day 2-ish quarterbacks, whether you want to put Jackson Dart there or not, whether or not he goes in round 1, let's just say he's in the mix at least for maybe the top of round 2. Ty McShay's really talking up that Tyler Shook has a lot of fans in the NFL. He could be in the mix early day 2. Jalen Milroe, we know the physical tools that he has. He could be in the mix. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic. Will Howard, I think it's a little too early, top of the second, but maybe if the Raiders really wanted him. I think with Cleveland, maybe not going quarterback in round 1 anymore. Maybe they like somebody and add it to the mix in day 2. If for some reason Tennessee doesn't take a quarterback in round 1 because they're all in on Abdul Carter, let's say, I think very much in play is them taking somebody else the top of the second round and trying to say, okay, maybe he could be our long-term starter. But they did go to second route last time with Will Levis. So to me, I don't know if they want to go back to that well again, but if they love Abdul Carter so much, I could see them maybe doing it. The Giants, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it goes quarterback, and they have to pick either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, I think they could be in the mix for a Dart or a Milroe, top of the second. You got the Raiders there. Maybe they consider Will Howard there. You got the Jets there. I mean, Justin Fields is really just signed to a 1-year deal, so that could be a spot for a young rookie quarterback with upside at the top of day 2. So a lot of intrigue at the top of that second round. And I think there's almost more intrigue based on the fact that Cleveland might not be going rookie quarterback at 2. The Raiders seem set right now at this pick. The Jets, I don't think, are looking round 1 at a quarterback anymore. So I think that opens up the possibility now for more intrigue with these day 2 quarterbacks for one of these teams saying, yeah, we didn't reach in round 1 for somebody, but let's see, these guys got some intrigue, some traits, some upside. We're willing to gamble at the top of the second. So I think the top of the second round could be a very interesting spot for teams looking to take these quarterbacks that might have some tools and traits and hope that they kind of strike lightning and get somebody in the top of the second who could become their long-term starter. Okay, let's go through the skill position, free agent signings. I've talked about some of them, but I want to hit on ones I haven't talked about, give my opinion, stock up, stock down. So let's start. I mentioned before, Sam Darnold ending up in Seattle after Minnesota didn't offer him a contract. They're moving on with J.J. McCarthy. Geno Smith gets shipped from Seattle to Pittsburgh. Sam Darnold ends up as the Seattle starter. There's no way around this. This is a massive stock down for where his value was at the end of the year. Obviously, we knew that he probably wasn't going to be back in Minnesota, but going from the Viking scheme, going from that cast of wide receivers, Jefferson, Addison, TJ Hawkinson, ideal, pristine setup, to now in a place that has Jackson Smith-Njigba, O-line concerns everywhere, no secondary receiver, massive stock down for Sam Darnold in terms of where the season ended, and he was producing like a QB1. If he stayed in Minnesota, he would probably be in that early QB2 value range. Now he's more of like a late QB2 value at best in Seattle at the current moment. Mentioned before, Jets signing Justin Fields. It's a 2-year deal. They can get out after 1. In terms of his dynasty stock, it's got to be stock up right now. He's got an opportunity. I think Tyrod Taylor is going to be there to be a mentor and try to help develop Justin Fields. I think that's the Jets' goal in mind. So I think there's a lot of stability in terms of his starting job for this year. It's only 1 year, but I think there's a lot of places that Justin Fields could have went that maybe there would have been a rookie waiting in the wings. Even if the Jets take a second-round rookie, I think Justin Fields is going to have a real shot, unless things really fall apart, to be the quarterback for the entire season. So I think stock up on Justin Fields, not so much the landing spot, more so on the fact that I think he's got the ability to be the guy for this entire season. We know he produces for fantasy when he's given the opportunity. So I think stock up on Justin Fields. I do think stock down on Garrett Wilson. I think the Jets are going to be a very conservative, very heavy run offense. So I think Garrett Wilson's stock does take a big dip. A guy who was going late round 1 of rookie drafts, a guy who was going round 1 of startup drafts. I think now his stock falls pretty significantly with Justin Fields at the helm. Not that he can't be a good receiver. I just don't think he could be an elite or great receiver. I just don't think they're going to have that type of volume. I know DJ Moore 2 years ago in Chicago had an unbelievable year with Justin Fields at the helm. I just don't see that as the roadmap for how the Jets want to play. I think Wilson will be a good number 2 fantasy wide receiver. I don't think he'll be a number 1 wide receiver for fantasy this year. So that's a little bit stocked down for sure. Other quarterback signings and the impact, Daniel Jones, I think it's going to Indianapolis is probably the best scenario for him. So slight stock up. I think he's a very interesting stash in your super flex and 2 quarterback leagues. I think the Colts are really souring on Anthony Richardson, a guy that I believe in the upside and the traits, but there's things internally that, work ethic, stuff like that, that seem to be out there enough that I'm not sure his leash is going to be very long there. They're saying it's an open competition. They paid him $14 million with incentives to push it up to like 17 or 18. So I think stock down on Anthony Richardson right now, because I think his hold on the job is very up in the air. And then stock up on Daniel Jones, because I do think Daniel Jones is going to go there and have a real opportunity to win that job. And if he plays well, maybe it turns into a long-term deal, for a couple of years, maybe. I think it's a good scheme fit for Daniel Jones as well. Talked about the Josh Dobbs thing before and the impact on that. The running back position, Aaron Jones staying in Minnesota, really intriguing to me. It seemed like it was a little bit of an overpay, but Minnesota has the cap room to do it. He's a good leader, solid running back. If I could get something for Aaron Jones right now in a trade, late second round rookie pick, I think I would do it. I think Minnesota, especially if they trade down, I think they're going to get a young running back in this class. I think they look at this as an opportunity. They have great skill players all over. They got a young rookie quarterback. They fortified the lines. I think Minnesota is going to invest in a running back. If it's not round 1, I think it's going to be somewhere on day 2, especially I think they're going to be moving around. I think they're getting a running back in the top 100 picks, and I think that's going to – listen, maybe Aaron Jones fends them off. We saw James Conner do it last year, but I think they probably are smart enough to realize that we want to pull the reins back a little bit on the workload for Aaron Jones. So I think that could hurt his fantasy value. And obviously his age, he's not a long-term answer. I think this would be his last year of having any type of real viable fantasy value. So if you can get something for him because he's attached to that offense, which is a great offense, I think I'd try to get out now, unless you're kind of stuck at the running back position and a contender, and you might just kind of have to ride it out. Rico Dowdle going to Carolina. I think For his value, I think it hurts because I think if he stayed in Dallas and depending on what they did in the draft, maybe he could have more value. But I think in Carolina, there's a couple of things interesting here. I think stock up on Chuba Hubbard. Jonathan Brooks is, I think, going to be out most of the year. I think Rico Dowdle is a fine part-time depth, lesser part of a committee running back. I don't think Dowdle is a real competition to take significant workload for Chuba Hubbard. But I think they paid him enough, and having Hubbard's contract and still having Jonathan Brooks waiting in the wings, I think it takes Carolina out of the running back market in the entire NFL draft. Listen, maybe 6th or 7th round. But I don't think there's any possibility now with Hubbard, with Dowdle, and with Brooks waiting in the wings for whenever he can, if he can get back, hopefully. I don't think they're taking a running back in the first 4 or 5 rounds. So I think that really locks in Chuba Hubbard in a no doubt about it primary role. Dowdle, the second guy there, part committee, depth, whatever you want to call it. So I think Rico Dowdle signing in Carolina is a huge stock up for Chuba Hubbard's value. I'd feel way more comfortable about Chuba Hubbard now prior to the NFL draft than I would have if Dowdle wasn't there. Not that I thought Carolina would have made another early investment in a thing, but it's such a great running back draft. I would have been hesitant to think that maybe they had another 3rd round or a 4th round pick. But now I think Hubbard's clearly better than Rico Dowdle, better receiver, more versatile. I don't think they're taking a running back anywhere in the first 4 rounds now. So I'll say stock up on Chuba Hubbard. Some other running back news, Najee Harris going to the Chargers. Right now, he's their primary guy. Listen, it's stock up on Najee Harris, obviously. We know Jim Harbaugh likes to run the football. We know the Chargers, how good at times J.K. Dobbins looked last year. But I'll say this about Najee Harris. If you get an opportunity between now and draft weekend to sell high on Najee Harris, I would take that opportunity. I don't care. His contract does not scream long-term answer. His contract doesn't even scream clear lead of a committee this year, and it definitely doesn't scream any value in the second year because it's a 1-year deal. I think the Chargers are drafting a back in the first 3 rounds, and I think there's a real possibility it's more of an even timeshare by the end of the year. I think the rookie could even be ahead. Najee Harris is who he is at this point. Maybe he's going to have, if he's the lead guy there, he's going to get enough volume to be very viable in fantasy, top 18, top 20 back. But I also think it's very, very, the hold on his job that he's going to have on that job, I think is going to be very minimal. I think there's a real chance that they get somebody somewhere on day 2 of the NFL draft. And I think then that guy is going to be the favorite to be the guy by the end of the year, or definitely by year 2. And Harris probably won't even be on the team. So stock up on Najee Harris right now, but I would use that stock up as an opportunity to sell high. Javonte Williams ends up in Dallas. I think they should have just kept Rico Dowdle and then drafted a running back. Same thing with Javonte Williams. Well, I think Najee Harris is better suited to be more valuable this year. I would basically take anything I can for Javonte Williams in a trade right now. If somebody believes he's going to be the starting bell cow running back for Dallas, by all means, find out what the offer is, because I think Dallas is drafting, whether it's a running back in round 1, round 2, round 3, they're getting a top 100 pick. Javonte Williams has not been the same player since the injury. Denver was using Joel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, a lot of guys over him. I would take my losses, trade Javonte Williams, especially if somebody right now is looking at him. Oh, he's the guy in Dallas. He signed for like $3 million. That's like backup 3rd string running back money. So I do not think he's going to be the guy there. I think they're going to invest in a running back within the first 2 rounds, and that guy's going to be the starter, or at least the lead of a committee, and Javonte Williams will be a secondary piece. Raheem Mostert going to the Raiders, I don't think moves the needle in terms of him at all, or the Raiders backfield. I expect the Raiders to be very much in the picture, maybe to get Ashton Genty in round 1. But I think there is a secondary effect of Raheem Mostert that's very interesting. And I think that is the fact that Miami now, I think, is in a situation and then they signed Alexander Madison also, between Mostert leaving, Madison signing there. I think it really sets up Jalen Wright to be the RB2 there in a high volume, effective run game. Devin Achane is not a guy who should be getting 20 carries a game, maybe 20 touches, not 20 carries. I think they moved up last year, gave up a future 3rd in this year's draft to get a 4th-round pick last year to take Jalen Wright. I would be buying Jalen Wright right now, stock up on him. I don't think he would cost a lot because of A-Chain there, because of how good this draft class is at the running back position. But if you can get right now for like an early round 3 pick, I would make that move every single league that I'm in because I think Wright's got big play potential. It's clear Mike McDaniel wanted him. He loves the speed. They have enough to go around to be a 2-backfield viable fantasy duo. I really am all in on Jalen Wright right now. He'd be a guy that I'd be targeting in every one of my leagues. Madison screams 3rd option, veteran presence, and I don't think they're going to go back to the well. Now, listen, maybe Mike McDaniel falls in love with another running back, but they have A-Chain, they have Wright, they have 2 young guys with big-time speed. Madison there, maybe more of a pass protector, catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit as a pass protector. I don't think they're going back to the well in the first 4 rounds for a running back. So I think it really stock up on Jalen Wright based on Raheem Mostert officially leaving, Alexander Madison coming in. I think there's some viability there. Small move like Kent Gainwell doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it does 2 things. One, he's going to Pittsburgh. I think right now Jalen Warren stock up. But the same thing I said about Najee Harris, the same thing I said about Jalen. And I like Jalen Warren, the player. I do. And I think he's going to have a role. But I think Pittsburgh's going to invest in a running back in the first couple rounds. So right now, today, and up until the NFL draft, is probably the highest value that Jalen Warren's going to have. Arthur Smith is not going into a year with Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell as his 2 primary backs. They are going to draft the running back probably on day 2. I don't think round 1, Omarion Hampton is out of the question. I would say probably on day 2 or early round or somewhere early on day 3. But even those day 3 guys, they are going to be day 2 talents. It's just so many good running backs. So again, if you get the right offer, I would take it for Jalen Warren because I think his value will only go down after NFL draft weekend. Keep this moving. The wide receiver position, Chris Godwin back to the Bucs on a major deal. I think it's status quo for that if he can come back from injury. Josh Palmer going to the Bills, 3 years, $36 million. Listen, he was not producing really for the Chargers. He goes to the Bills receiving chart. They gave him decent money. We didn't see a lot from Keon Coleman last year. They kept Khalil Shakir. He's their slot guy. He's going to be probably their number 1 option in terms of, targets. Curtis Samuel was a disappointment for them last year. If Keon Coleman doesn't take the next step to really be one of the primary guys of Josh Allen, I think it opens up the door for Josh Palmer to have a chance. He could be the 2nd wide receiver in Buffalo on that team. And that's a viable spot you want to be in with how great of a quarterback Josh Allen is. So I think sneaky stock up on Josh Palmer. And if you're not a believer in Keon Coleman, there's a real possibility that Josh Palmer could be the 2nd best wide receiver for the Bills. And we'll see. Dalton Kincaid hasn't really materialized to a great fantasy asset yet. I think we know Khalil Shakir is probably going to be a guy, if he stays healthy, who catches 90 balls. But I think there's a possibility Josh Palmer can catch 65 balls and have a pretty good, depth of, target and catch yards per catch, and maybe have 6 to 8 touchdowns. That could be fantasy viable. I think those are realistic numbers for him, especially if Keon Coleman doesn't take the next step. So I would say stock up for sure on Josh Palmer. Darius Slayton staying with the Giants, same exact contract as Josh Palmer, 3 years, $36 million. I would say stock neutral, but with the possibility that it could go up, right? The Giants had horrendous quarterback play for basically all of Darius Slayton's career. If they get Aaron Rodgers and he bounces back with a really good year, if they take a first-round quarterback and they perform well, there could be a possibility that Darius Slayton has a little bit more value this year. DeAndre Hopkins ends up in Baltimore. I think at this point he's a veteran presence. I don't think he's going to have a lot of fantasy viability. I think that offense will still run Bruce Flowers, the tight ends, Lamar Jackson running, Derrick Henry running. So I don't see a lot of fantasy, issues from the DeAndre Hopkins signing. Hollywood Brown signing in Kansas City is interesting. It's got a lot of layers to it. The Xavier Worthy stuff, I'm not even going to touch that. We'll see how that situation plays itself out. Rashee Rice is coming off of injury, and he might have a suspension. So there's a lot of uncertainty with the Chiefs. I'm stunned that Hollywood Brown couldn't get a 3-year, $36 million contract similar to Josh Palmer or similar to Darius Slayton, but he's back in Kansas City, a 1-year deal. There's a possibility that he could be one of the top receivers for Kansas City. And if he could stay healthy and other things kind of go sideways in terms of some of the other receivers there for Kansas City, there could be a possibility that Hollywood Brown's the best receiver for the Chiefs this year. Obviously, Travis Kelce's still going to be there getting his looks. But again, Kelce's getting up there in age. Like, he's a guy that they want to try to limit his snaps and his stuff during the season to keep him fresh for the playoffs. I don't think they're going to go back to the well early in the draft in terms of a receiver. I think maybe with the stuff going on with Worthy or Rice, they could consider someone on day 2, but I think they got a lot of work to do on that offensive line. So I think if they go receiver, we're talking more day 3 type player. So I think there's an opportunity there for Hollywood Brown. He could be a really interesting buy low. Maybe you can't buy him low, but we haven't seen Hollywood Brown be a big fantasy factor in a while. That I think if you came when people are always craving rookie picks before the NFL draft or right after the NFL draft, and you came in with an offer of like a mid-3rd round pick, that might be enough to get Hollywood Brown right now, especially if people are like, oh, Rice is coming back. Worthy, might not be. So I think there's a possibility that Hollywood Brown has some sneaky upside and can still be bought relatively low. De'Ami Brown signing a 1-year, $10 million deal. Obviously, the Tutu Atwell was surprising for 1 year 10. De'Ami Brown right there surprising. I do think De'Ami Brown has more upside than Tutu Atwell, and obviously that's something that I think we're going to see, because I didn't even talk about it. Kind of tied in here. I forgot to mention at the top of the show, Davante Adams going to the Rams. I think it's a great landing spot for him. I think he's still got plenty left in the tank. I think there's plenty for him and Puka Nacua to both get in that offense. They're going to be the primary guys. Maybe it slightly dings Puka Nacua at the top if you're trying to break ties between some of the great receivers that are at the top of your dynasty wide receiver rankings. But I still think for Davante Adams, they're going to be a more perfect landing spot for the Rams. I know he's getting up there in age, but I still think he's got 1 or 2 potentially really good years left. A lot of attention will go to Puka's way. McVay has a great scheme, really opens things up for his receivers. I think Davante Adams, stock up on Davante Adams after, I know last year Aaron Rodgers peppered him with targets, but that was with Aaron Rodgers. Most other landing spots would have been a stock down. I think going to Matthew Stafford, going to that Rams offense is stock up on Davante Adams. And then getting back to the Tutu Atwell and De'Ami Brown thing, listen, I don't think the Tutu Atwell, he's just a vertical speedster. He brings more tactical value than any fantasy production. De'Ami Brown's interesting because the Jaguars moved on from Christian Kirk. Obviously, Brian Thomas is a stud. I think they could be in the market for a wide receiver pretty early in the draft to pair with Brian Thomas. But if they don't, they lost Evan Ingram. They lost Christian Kirk. Brenton Strange is not as good a receiver as Evan Ingram. De'Ami Brown is not nearly as good a player as Christian Kirk. So, yeah, maybe De'Ami Brown falls into some production, him or Parker Washington, and they obviously like De'Ami Brown enough to give him a 1 year, $10 million deal. But I think they're going to get a wide receiver in the first 3 rounds to pair with Brian Thomas. So, yeah, you could take a stab on De'Ami Brown. I think another wide receiver of more value is coming to Jacksonville based on that. But if for some reason they don't, it does open up the possibility that maybe De'Ami Brown could have some fantasy viability there as an outside receiver opposite Brian Thomas, who's obviously going to draw so much attention his way. At the tight end position, talked about Evan Ingram already and the impact on that. Stock up on Evan Ingram for sure. And I think he's going to be peppered with a lot of targets there. I think he could even be second on targets there after Cortland Sutton, unless they make another investment pretty high in the pass catcher in the draft. Status quo on Mike Gesicki returning to Cincinnati and Zach Ertz going to Arizona. I think the one thing about Zach Ertz going to Arizona is they also brought back Jonathan Bates, and I know he's more of a blocking tight end, but they've invested like $13 million in the tight end position. Those are going to be the guys on the field, Zach Ertz and Bates, in their 2 tight end sets. When it's 1 tight end, if it's a blocking guy they need, it's going to be Bates. If it's a pass catching option they need, I think it's going to be Zach. It's going to be Ertz. So I think there's no way around this. I love Ben Sinnott coming out last year. If you don't block a day 2 tight end, his rookie year and his second year, if you're not if you're right now not believing in him. So right now, Ben Sinnott is just a stock down player. And maybe you could say he's waiting in the wings, but for them to bring back Zach Ertz, for them to have a really great blocking tight end like that, to me, there's no other way to think that Ben Sinnott was, a pretty intriguing pick last year in rookie drafts. And now, right now, I don't think anybody would want to trade for Ben Sinnott because we're talking about, okay, maybe next year Zach Ertz isn't there. And then in his third year, maybe he's viable. Maybe he starts to eat in this year. I'm sure that's what they want to happen, but I don't think you can buy into that right now. I think if they saw signs that he was ready to be the pass catching guy, I do not think they would have given Zach Ertz $6 million. This isn't bringing him in for like, $2 million or $3 million. They brought him back, and I know they have money. They got plenty of money spare, so maybe they wanted to make sure he was there, and they're hoping Sinna takes the next move and the next step, and that's still possible. But I do think the re-signing of him being clearly third on the depth chart right now is something that is definitely a little bit of a stock down for Ben Sinnott. In terms of any other small moves, Johnson returning to the Saints at the tight end position. I was surprised with the 3-year, $30 million contract. To me, like, he's a secondary piece, average starting tight end in terms of a pass catcher. I was surprised they gave Juwan Johnson that type of money. But right now, they don't got a lot. They got Chris Olave. Juwan Johnson could be their second best pass catcher. We'll see about Rashid Shaheed coming back from injury. But I was surprised a little bit about that. But they clearly are investing in him. So at least I would say stock neutral on him, like Gesicki. Gesicki's value, though, is so much tied to either Chase or T. Higgins being hurt or not available. If they're both available, there's not a lot to go around to really make Gesicki viable in fantasy. So there it is, guys. My thoughts in terms of how it impacts the NFL draft, how it impacts their dynasty values for every relevant free agent signing, free agent trade that we've had here over the last 4-5 days. If you're enjoying this content, please get over to the website, SS Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out our premium content tab for $9.99. You can get all our premium notebooks. You get the scouting notebook, which has 100 detailed player profiles on the offensive skill players, how they win, strengths, functional areas, developmental areas, NFL role, fantasy spin, NFL draft projection. You get our rankings notebook. It has all our different rankings. Our tiers for the 2025 NFL draft class were just added to that. We are soon within, if we don't need to do another free agency show next week, our Tier Busters series will start next week. These are our exclusive S2S tiers that tie in draft projection, our film analysis, dynasty rookie drafts. It's some of my favorite shows of the year and our listeners as well. So we will start them either next week or the week after, depending on if we need another free agency, fallout, podcast. But the tier buster shows are coming. My tiers are now in the rankings notebook. And then obviously all our other rankings in there, draft rankings, dynasty rookie rankings from last year. We'll have new dynasty rookie rankings after the draft, our IDP rookie rankings, our Devy rankings, our positional overall dynasty rankings, which once free agency kind of settles, I will do a full update on that. I'm going to let free agency play itself out before I do the positional dynasty rankings updates from all of the free agency and the trades and stuff like that. And then you get the new dynasty rookie rankings and everything post-draft. And then in April, you get the draft projections notebook, thoughts on almost 400 players, a snapshot of how they win, developmental areas, their combine measurements, their combine testing, tabs for every position, offense and defense, based on how we are projecting it to come off the board, not my rankings, based on everything that's out there, trying to give you a guide of what's going to happen on draft weekend, a tab projecting the 32 picks to go in round 1, a tab projecting the top 100 picks to go in the first 3 rounds, and a tab trying to project every single pick in the entire NFL draft. We have had tremendous success with our draft projections notebook. We did the huddle report last year. We had like 84 out of the 100 names to be selected in the top 100. We were in like the top 10. We've had tremendous success in round 1, anywhere between 27 and 30 correct in terms of predicting what prospects will come off the board in round 1. And we've consistently been in that 84 to 88 range in terms of projecting the top 100 players to come off the board. And we've also maintained 80 to 82% in terms of predicting every single pick selected in the NFL draft as well. So if you want that, $9.99, please consider purchasing it. It's the lifeblood of what we do here to help us continue to do what we do here. If you've bought it in the past, please consider purchasing it again. If you've never purchased it or you're new to the pod, please consider checking it out for $9.99. Helps us tremendously. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.